And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Monday, July 2nd. I am the host for today's program, Paul DeMain, and many of the stories we read here can also be found at our website, IndianCountryTV.com. And here are some of the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. Record numbers of a once waning population of Sockeye salmon have been returning to the northwest Columbia Basin this summer, with thousands more crossing the river's dam in a single day than the total numbers seen in some previous years. Since Bonneville Dam outside Portland was built in 1938, there have been plenty of times there weren't 38,000 sockeye salmon swimming over the fish ladders in a whole year. But last week, that many passed the Columbia River Dam, and another 41,000 swam over the dam the next day in one day, at a rate of nearly 30 a minute. That brought the total so far to 290,000 fish. A record number of more than 400,000 of the Columbian Basin's furthest swimming salmon are expected to return this year, almost all of them wild fish bred in rivers instead of the hatcheries that produces most Northwest salmon. Biologists credit habitat improvements in the Okanagan Basin of northern Washington and Canada, improved dam operations, and favorable ocean conditions for the numbers. Broken glass crunched under Kevin DeMain's feet last Friday as he walked gingerly through the rubble that used to be his house on the base of the Scotch Valley Hills near Helena, Montana. The wildfire that destroyed the manufactured home and blackened his 76 acres was still smoldering in the hills behind him. One of over 30 fires burning last week in Arizona, Colorado, Montana, and Wyoming. At least 6 fires have charred hundreds of thousands of acres across the state of just Montana last week. And in Colorado Springs, Colorado, one of the worst fires of the summer burned out a couple hundred homes before slowing down this weekend. 70 homes burned in a fire south of Roundup, Montana, and possibly dozens more in a fire that raced through Ashland and parts of the northern Cheyenne Indian Reservation as well last week. More high winds and weather systems were expected to pass through the region in the next few days. That's prompting hundreds of firefighters to dig in along the edges of the major blazes and try to tamp them down before the wind whips them back to life. In central and southeastern Montana, where wildfires have burned more than 200 square miles, and rural subdivisions have been reduced to pile ashes, a representative of the Northern Cheyenne tribe said as many as 32 houses have burned there. A 20-year-old man was charged June 29th with beating and dragging a 4-year-old just weeks before the child's body was found under the porch of his mother's home on the Isabel Reservation, also known as the Saginaw Chippewa Reservation in Michigan, while Anthony Bennett was not charged in the death of Carnell Chamberlain. So far, family members say he was the last person to see Carnell alive before his disappearance June 21st. A week-long, seemingly fruitless search of woods and ponds around the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Reservation ended at the child's home, June 20th. Bennett faces a charge of assault resulting in substantial bodily injury to a child under 16 and was sent back to jail after the brief hearing in federal court in Bay City to await a detention hearing July 3rd. Kevin Chamberlain, Jamie's cousin, a family spokesman and the tribe's former chief, said Bennett had been in his cousin's life for about 7 months. He said the family believed Bennett had a troubled past and that he came off as a kind of a wannabe thug. Members of the Muscogee Creek Nation were on the road today running across country in a relay run, delivering a tribal resolution in support of the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act to Congressman John Sullivan's office there. Participants were running 1-mile legs beginning at the Muscogee Creek Nation Mound Auditorium parking lot, and where we're going to end up at the Congressman Sullivan's office in Tulsa, Oklahoma. For more information on that run, how it turned out, and pictures, you can call Shara Ridge at 918-520-9161. Executive Secretary Athena Sanchi-Yellup of the Yakama Nation Tribal Council said during June, and speaking on behalf of 10,400 Yakama Nation members in Washington, D.C. before the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs, condemned a new IRS policy subjecting distributions of tribal trust resources to taxation despite more than 50 years of established federal law and policy on On the contrary, IRS recently notified the Yakama Nation that it would be audited to determine whether it had properly issued Forms 1099 to tribal members for per capita distributions of trust resources, even though such distributions were deemed non-taxable by the regional solicitor of the Bureau of Indian Affairs as far back as 1957. Quote, my people ceded over 10 million acres in the United States in exchange for promises that the 1.4 million acre reservation would be reserved for the exclusive use and benefit of the Yakama people, she said. Our trust resources are not taxable. Both the Per Capita Act and the Treaty of 1855 support Executive Secretary Sanchi Yallop's statement before the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs that trust resources derived from timber harvesting on the reservation are non-taxable. The Per Capita Act explicitly provides that trust distributions are tax-exempt, and the Treaty of 1855 reserves the Yakama Nation the exclusive use and benefit of their land and resources there. Great Lakes regional artist Sarah Balbin has taken some summertime to hold a series of book signings for her new book called Spirit of the Ojibwe, Images of Ojibwe Elders, one of them sponsored by the Redberry Books in Cable, Wisconsin on June 28th, along with co-authors Jim Bailey, Thelma Naquinabe, and publisher Jim Perlman of Holy Cow Press. So here's a little bit about what Balbin's had to say about the book, opening her speech with a line from Kim Blazer's, one of Kim Blazer's poetry books, from the White Earth Ojibwe. The 262-page book contains historical narratives from the elders, maps, and submissions from local historical or history buffs like Dr. Rick St. Germain. That book is distributed by Consortium Books Sales and Distribution.
There have to be stories. That's how you know. That's how you belong. That's how you know you belong. And this book is about knowing the history, knowing the stories, learning, and people understanding that they have roots, that they do belong. One of the things I've pointed out, what I included was a map of Wisconsin. There are 11 reservations in Wisconsin. Right now, where we sit, or seated, you have the Red Cliff Reservation, you have the Bad River Reservation, you have the Lac du Flambeau Reservation, you have the Lac Ray Reservation, just south of you, south of Hayward, or just a few miles out of Hayward. Please, it's a beautiful setting. Drive there. They have wonderful businesses, hospitality, hotels.
And finally, the La Coudray Boys and Girls Club team from La Coudray. The LCO Cubs won the regional baseball tournament, winning over the village of Ojibwe in Birchwood, Wisconsin in the final championship game. And here's what it looks like, just a bit of that, as the Cubs were pitching in the last inning with a 4-1 lead.
One more K, boy. That's all we need. Come on.
Yeah! Come on, you got this. Yeah, just focus. Game. Do it every day. Keep your sights on it, boy. Come on.
Start.
Yeah!
One more, Dakota. We're out of here.
Good.
Come on, come on.
You can guess it, play right in the glove.
Get him to swing. Get him to swing. Outside. 2-2. All right, come on, Dakota. Shake that off, man.
It's all good.
One more strike. Start 3.
Yeah!
All right.
They toasted them. None of the kids in our community.
And that is another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you for joining with us and come back again soon.